I never thought my life would come to this. My name is Layla. I am 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, life has been a battle I fought with my bare hands. When my husband abandoned me, leaving me with nothing but our small son Aman, I promised myself I would never let despair consume me. But promises are fragile. When hunger gnaws at your child's stomach, when bills pile up like mountains, and when eviction notices threaten to throw you out onto the streets. That night, sitting in a corner of the luxurious hall, I questioned everything I had become. The lights above me shimmered like stars mocking me for daring to dream. I wasn't dressed in a gown of choice. It was provided fabric meant to display, not protect. The men in the room looked at us as though we were art possessions to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. I clutched my trembling hands together, whispering my son's name under my breath like a prayer. Aman, forgive me for what I am about to do. The organizer called my name, lot number 23. My knees nearly buckled as I stepped into the spotlight, its heat suffocating. Whispers spread through the crowd like fire licking through dry wood. Their eyes were sharp, devouring, filled with curiosity, but not compassion. And then a voice cut through the murmur. Deep, commanding, it didn't need to shout. $1 million. The entire hall fell silent. My heart thumped painfully against my ribs. I turned my head toward the source, and there he was. A man with tanned skin, piercing dark eyes, and an aura that seemed to shift the air itself. Kareem Al-Fed, a billionaire magnate whispered about in newspapers, powerful, ruthless, and untouchable. His bid silenced every other man in that room. Sold, the organizer declared, his voice almost jubilant. I felt the ground sway beneath me. $1 million more than I could ever imagine, more than generations of my family might ever hold. And yet the number didn't soothe me. It shackled me. For the man who bought me wasn't buying companionship. He wanted something far deeper, far darker. In the private room afterward, Kareem sat across from me. The silence was heavy, suffocating. He slid a contract toward me, his voice steady, his words clear. Read it, carefully. My hands shook as I flipped the pages. With each line, my stomach tightened, until my eyes froze on the main clause. To bear him a child. To leave the child behind. To walk away once it was born. You want me to... My voice cracked. To have a child and abandon it. He folded his arms, his gaze unflinching. I need an heir. The contract is clear. The world tilted. Fear and rage collided inside me. I cannot do this. I will not leave my own flesh and blood. His voice hardened. You knew what you were agreeing to when you stepped onto that stage. There is no room for regret now. My throat burned as tears threatened. This is inhumane. Do you think you can just buy a child and discard its mother? He stepped closer, his towering presence casting a shadow over me. I paid $1 million for you, Layla. This is not a game. You no longer have a choice. The words struck me like a blow. My chest heaved, but I thought of Aman. His small hands, his empty stomach, his innocent smile. Every bill I couldn't pay, every landlord's threat, every sleepless night came crashing down. With a broken heart, I signed my name. The pen felt like a dagger carving away my soul. That night, alone in my tiny apartment, I kissed my son goodbye. I'll be back soon, I lied, pressing my lips to his hair as he drifted to sleep. My elderly neighbor promised to watch over him, but it didn't soothe the ache that tore through me as I walked away. The next morning, a limousine waited. It carried me through the desert, past the life I had known, into a world I couldn't fathom. When we arrived at Kareem's mansion, I gasped. Towering gates opened to reveal sprawling gardens, fountains whispering under the sun, and a palace carved of marble and glass. It was breathtaking, and it felt like a prison. Inside, Kareem's rules were laid out with precision. My privacy would be respected, but my duty was non-negotiable. The staff treated me politely, but with the detached courtesy reserved for someone who did not belong. Only Amira, the housekeeper, offered me warmth. She guided me to a lavish room, its silken sheets mocking the simplicity of the bed I had once shared with my son. That evening, standing on the balcony, I stared at the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, a cruel reminder of the vast distance between me and Aman. My heart ached, as if it were tearing apart. A knock at the door startled me, Kareem himself. His expression unreadable, his words simple. "Tomorrow we visit the doctor." He left without another word, leaving me alone with the weight of my choices. That night sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Aman's face, his smile fading as he asked me when I would return. My chest burned with the guilt of a mother who had sold her own soul for survival. And yet beneath that guilt, another feeling stirred, fear of the man whose world I had been dragged into. Kareem Al-Fed was powerful, cold, and dangerous. But in his eyes I thought I glimpsed something else. Something hidden. Something broken. I didn't know it then, but what awaited me in his mansion wasn't just despair. It was a journey that would unravel secrets darker than I could imagine, and a connection that would test everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about sacrifice. The morning came with a sharp knock at my door. I hadn't slept, my eyes swollen from hours of crying into a pillow that smelled too clean, too foreign. I dragged myself from the silken sheets, every step heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Outside, Amira waited with a soft smile, offering me tea. Her kindness was a fragile thread in this place, and I clung to it. "The car is ready," she said quietly. At the hospital, the air was cold and clinical, the walls lined with wealth that turned even sterility into luxury. Kareem walked beside me, silent, his face unreadable. He didn't look at me as a woman. He looked at me as a vessel, a contract, a means to an end. Yet when the doctor entered and greeted him with deference, I noticed something flicker in his eyes, nervousness fleeting and quickly concealed. The tests began, endless prodding, and questions my body reduced to numbers and probabilities. I wanted to scream, to run, to rip the wires from my arms, and flee into the desert. But I sat still because I remembered Aman's empty plate, the cold nights when he shivered under a thin blanket, and the $1 million that could keep him safe long after I was gone. That evening back at the mansion, I sat on the balcony staring at the desert sunset. The sky burned crimson as if the earth itself was bleeding. My heart twisted. Was Aman eating dinner now? Was he asking for me? Did he hate me for leaving? I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle the sob rising in my throat. A voice startled me. "You think I don't see the way you look at the horizon?" I turned. Kareem stood in the doorway, his posture casual but his eyes sharp. "You left someone behind," he said, not as a question, but as a fact. I didn't answer, my silence was enough. He stepped closer. "A son." My body stiffened. "Yes," I whispered. "Aman. He is 7. He is my entire world." For a moment, Kareem's face softened, a shadow of something human flickering across it. "And yet, you came here." I snapped, my voice trembling with fury. "Don't you dare judge me. You bought me. You turned me into a commodity. I did this because I had no choice." The air between us vibrated with my rage. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked out at the desert, his jaw tight. We all make choices we despise, but some of us never get the chance to undo them. Then almost too quietly he added, "I once had a son too." The words stunned me. My breath caught in my throat. But before I could speak, he turned and left, his tall figure disappearing down the corridor, leaving only silence and the faint echo of something broken in his voice. That night I lay awake, his words replaying in my mind. I once had a son too. What did he mean? What had happened to him? And why did a man who claimed to want an heir speak with such bitterness, such grief? Days bled into weeks. The contract's shadow hung over me, but so did my questions. Kareem remained distant, yet sometimes I caught him staring, not with desire, but with something heavier, regret perhaps, or longing. The mansion was filled with opulence, yet it felt haunted, as though its walls carried memories too heavy to bear. One evening, while wandering through the library, I stumbled upon a framed photograph half hidden on a shelf. A boy, maybe 6 years old, with dark eyes that mirrored Kareem's. The frame was dusty, the glass cracked. My chest tightened. His son. I heard footsteps behind me. Kareem's voice was low, almost raw. "You shouldn't be here." I turned, the photo still in my hands. this is him, isn't it? His jaw clenched. He took the frame, gently brushing a thumb across the boy's face. For the first time I saw his armor crack. His name was Zaid, he whispered. He was my heir, my blood, and he was taken from me. Pain radiated from his words. His eyes shone with a grief so profound it silenced me. Slowly he returned the frame to the shelf, his hand lingering as though he couldn't let go. I wanted to ask how, why, what had happened, but the look on his face stopped me. It wasn't a wound. It was a scar carved so deep it had reshaped him. That night, I understood something vital. Kareem hadn't bought me only for an heir. He had bought me because he was haunted by loss, by guilt, by an emptiness wealth could never fill. And in that realization, my hatred tangled with something I didn't want to admit: pity. Because behind his billions, his ruthlessness, his control was a man drowning in the same ocean I was lost. But while I clung to my son for survival, Kareem had drowned in the memory of his. And that difference would shape the war that lay ahead. The days after that revelation shifted everything. I couldn't look at Kareem without seeing the shadow of the boy in the photograph, without hearing the tremor in his voice when he said the name Zaid. The mansion, which once felt like a prison, now felt like a mausoleum built not of stone, but of grief. The servants walked softly, as if the air itself carried sorrow too heavy to disturb. I started noticing details I had missed before. A locked wing of the house curtains, always drawn, as if hiding something too painful to expose. A small bicycle left in the corner of the garage, its tires flat with years of neglect. And in the garden, under a tree that stood taller than the rest, a tiny plaque carved with Arabic words I could not read, but instinctively understood it was a grave marker. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to demand the truth. But every time our eyes met, I faltered. There was a wall around him, built brick by brick from agony, anger, and pride. Breaking through it felt impossible. Yet slowly cracks appeared. One evening during dinner, I noticed he wasn't eating. His fork rested untouched, his gaze lost in the flickering candlelight. I summoned my courage. "Tell me about him," I whispered. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Who?" "Zaid," I said, my voice trembling. "Tell me what happened to your son." The silence stretched. For a long moment, I thought he would order me out, remind me of my place. But instead, his shoulders sagged, his mask slipping. "He drowned." Kareem murmured, his voice rough. "In the pool, right there in that garden. He was 6. The words pierced me like knives. I covered my mouth, my heart shattering for a child I had never met. I'm so sorry." His jaw tightened, his eyes glistening with fury, not at me, but at himself. "I wasn't there. I was in a meeting signing papers, making deals. My wife blamed me. She left. And she was right." He slammed his fist against the table, making the dishes rattle. I failed him. I failed my family. Tears blurred my vision. I saw him not as the cold billionaire who had bought me, but as a father hollowed out by regret. And in that moment, a strange connection bound us, two parents grieving two souls, tethered to children who defined our existence. Later that night, alone in my room, I couldn't stop thinking about Aman. What if I lost him too? What if one day he slipped from my hands, swallowed by the same cruelty that had devoured Zaid? The thought was unbearable. My chest tightened with a mix of guilt and desperation. The next morning, I told Kareem the truth. "I can't do this. I can't have a child for you and leave it behind. I already have a son. He is my everything. If you want me to carry life, you must understand I will never abandon it." His eyes darkened, anger sparking like fire. "You signed the contract." "I signed it with a gun to my head," I shot back. "Not literally, but you know it was. Poverty leaves no choices." We stood inches apart, our pain colliding, our wounds tearing open. His breath was ragged, his voice low. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I find joy in forcing you?" His hands trembled as he gripped the back of a chair. "I am trying to fill a void that cannot be filled. I thought if I had another child, maybe I could breathe again." His confession silenced me. The monster I had painted in my mind was not heartless. It was broken, clawing for air in a tomb of memories. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't erase his pain, but I could confront it. I placed my hand gently on his arm. He flinched but didn't pull away. Kareem, I whispered. He will always be your son. Nothing can replace him. But if you want a future, you can't chain it to the past. For the first time since I arrived, I saw his eyes soften not with desire but with the fragile beginning of trust. But trust was dangerous. Because in the shadows of the mansion, not everyone wanted Kareem to heal. Whispers traveled through the halls, hints of betrayal, of schemes against him. And soon I would discover that my presence in his home wasn't just about the contract. It was about uncovering truths buried deeper than grief, truths that could destroy us both. Type, continue to receive the next part. The whispers began innocently enough, snatches of conversation I overheard while walking through the mansion's endless hallways. The staff lowered their voices whenever I entered, their eyes darting nervously as though afraid of being caught. At first, I dismissed it as gossip, the kind that lingers in every household. But soon patterns emerged. Words like inheritance, board members, and betrayal floated through the air like poison drifting from unseen cracks. One afternoon, I found Amira in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured tea. "They don't all want you here," she murmured without meeting my eyes. "Some believe you are a distraction. Others think you are dangerous." "Dangerous," I repeated, stunned. "I have no power here." She glanced at the door, making sure we were alone. "Sometimes the presence of truth is the greatest danger of all." Her words gnawed at me. What truth? What role did I play in this world of wealth and wounds? I thought I had come here only to fulfill a contract, to sacrifice a piece of myself so my son could live better. But something larger was unraveling, something I had been blind to. That evening, I caught Kareem in the study, his face illuminated by the glow of a desk lamp, papers scattered around him. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire pressing down on his shoulders. I hesitated at the doorway before asking, "Are you in danger?" His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Why would you ask that?" "Because your own staff speak in whispers. Because they look at me as though I'm part of something I don't understand." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't listen to servants' chatter. It will only confuse you." But I had learned to hear the truth buried beneath denial. I stepped closer, my voice firm. "If you want me to stay, if you want me to bear the weight of your contract, then you owe me honesty." For a long moment he stared at me, his jaw tight. Then he leaned back, his eyes filled with shadows. After Zaid's death, the board began circling like vultures. They whispered that I was unfit, that grief had made me weak. "Some want me gone. They see me bringing you here as desperation, as proof I've lost control." I swallowed hard. "And are they wrong?" His lips curved into a bitter smile. "Perhaps not. But desperation doesn't make me weak, it makes me dangerous." The fire in his words both frightened and fascinated me. For the first time, I saw the full measure of the man before me, not just a grieving father, but a warrior surrounded by enemies who would exploit his wounds. And somehow, my presence was part of that battlefield. Days later, the tension in the mansion reached a boiling point. I was walking through the courtyard when I stumbled upon two men in suits, board members I had seen visiting before. They didn't notice me at first. "She'll ruin him," one hissed. "A maid, a single mother. What does that say about our empire?" "The sooner we prove he's unfit, the sooner the company can be salvaged," the other replied. "Her presence is the rope he's tying around his own neck." My stomach turned to ice. They weren't just attacking Kareem, they were planning to use me as the weapon. That night, I confronted him. "They're plotting against you. They're using me as proof that you're unstable." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I know." My breath caught. "And you still keep me here?" His gaze softened for a fleeting second. "Because despite everything, you are the first person who sees me not as a billionaire, not as a failure, but as a man." His words burned through me, leaving both warmth and terror. Because seeing him meant I could no longer deny the truth. I was no longer just a prisoner of his contract. I was entangled in his grief, his war, and his fragile hope. But entanglement comes with a cost. The more I became part of his world, the more I risked losing my own. One night, as I lay awake, the desert wind howling outside, I whispered to myself, "What have I done, Aman? What have I dragged us into?" The answer came not in dreams, but in the knock that echoed through my door the next morning, urgent, sharp, and filled with danger. When I opened it, Amira stood there, her face pale. "You must come quickly," she whispered. "It's Kareem. They've made their move." The corridors echoed with hurried footsteps as I followed Amira, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear her whispers. She led me to the west wing of the mansion, a place I had never been allowed to enter before. The air there was different, colder, charged with tension, as though the walls themselves knew secrets too dark to carry. At the end of the hall, the heavy doors to Kareem's private study stood wide open. Inside, chaos reigned. Papers littered the floor, the desk overturned, and Kareem stood in the center like a storm contained within a man. His fists clenched, his face pale, but his eyes blazing with fury. 3 men board members were there too, their smug expressions betraying no fear. "You think you can walk into my home and strip me of my name?" Kareem's voice thundered. One of them sneered. "You already did that yourself, Kareem. Parading around with some maid drafting ridiculous contracts, you've lost your mind. The company deserves better than a man crippled by grief." His words sliced through the air. My chest tightened, anger and fear colliding inside me. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them they knew nothing of the pain that carved scars into Kareem's soul. But before I could speak, Kareem's gaze shifted past them, landing on me. "Leave her out of this," he growled. But they didn't. One stepped closer, his voice dripping with venom. "She is the proof, Kareem. Proof that you're unfit. A servant plucked from poverty, paraded like a trophy, forced into contracts no sane man would draft. You've brought shame to us all." I felt their eyes burning into me, stripping me of dignity, turning me back into the commodity I had once been. My hands trembled, but then Kareem moved. He crossed the room in a heartbeat, positioning himself between them and me, his tall frame shielding me from their cruelty. "If you touch her, if you so much as breathe her name again, I will destroy you," he said, his voice low, lethal. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then with forced calm, one of them smiled thinly. "You won't need to destroy us, Kareem. You'll destroy yourself. We've already called for a vote. By tomorrow, your empire will no longer be yours." They left as swiftly as they had come, their laughter echoing in the marble halls like knives dragging across stone. When the door shut, Kareem collapsed into the chair behind him, burying his face in his hands. His broad shoulders shook, and for the first time I saw him not as a titan of power, but as a man broken, teetering on the edge of ruin. I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked up, his eyes red but still fierce. "Because you are not part of this war. You don't deserve the weight of my enemies." "But I'm already part of it," I whispered. "From the moment you bought me, from the moment I signed that contract, I've been in the middle of everything. Don't push me away now." His gaze locked with mine, raw and unguarded. "I don't know how to protect you, Layla. Everyone I love, I lose. Zaid, my wife, and now you stand here and I fear you will be next." The confession cut through me sharper than any blade. Against all odds, against every wall I had built, my heart had begun to feel something for this man, something terrifying and undeniable. I knelt beside him, placing my hand over his trembling one. "You don't have to protect me from the truth. Let me fight with you, Kareem. Because if we don't stand together, we'll both drown." He stared at me, silent, stretching between us, until finally he whispered, "You're braver than I ever imagined." That night, neither of us slept. We pored over documents, emails, records, searching for something that could stop the board from tearing his empire apart. The weight of the hours pressed down on us, exhaustion carving lines into our faces, but the fire in our eyes refused to dim. By dawn, we found it. Hidden in the contracts, buried under layers of deception, was evidence of corruption not tied to Kareem, but to the very men trying to dethrone him. Kickbacks, embezzlement, bribes, all signed, sealed, and hidden in plain sight. I looked at him, my heart racing. This could save you." Kareem's lips curved into a grim smile. "No, Layla, this could destroy them." And for the first time since stepping into his world, I felt not just fear or despair, but hope. But hope is fragile and enemies are merciless. Even as we prepared to expose the truth, I couldn't shake the gnawing thought, what price would we have to pay to win? The sun rose like fire across the desert, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Inside the mansion, Kareem and I sat hunched over the table, our eyes gritty with exhaustion, our hands smudged with ink from hours of sorting through evidence. But what lay before us was undeniable proof that the very men who accused Kareem of being unfit were themselves the ones siphoning money from the empire. "This is it," I whispered, my fingers trembling as I traced the signatures. They tried to bury it, but you can use this against them. Kareem leaned back, his jaw tight, his gaze sharp. If I expose this, it will not only save me, it will annihilate them. But once I do, there's no turning back. They'll come for me, for you, for anyone who stands beside me. His words chilled me. Yet when I looked into his eyes, I saw not just a man cornered, but a man reborn. His grief had been a chain, but now it seemed like fire fueling his resolve. We have no choice, I said firmly. If we let them win Zaid's memory, your empire, everything, you'll lose it all. And my voice cracked. I'll have sacrificed myself for nothing. Silence hung heavy between us. Then Kareem reached across the table, his rough hand covering mine. His touch was steady, grounding. Layla, you've already given more than I ever had a right to ask. But if you stand with me now, know this, there will be no safe return. Once the storm begins, it will consume us both. I squeezed his hand, tears stinging my eyes. Then let the storm come. That evening, he summoned the board for an emergency meeting. The mansion's grand hall was transformed into a battlefield of words and power. Men in tailored suits filled the room, their expressions smug, certain of their victory. I stood at the edge, my heart hammering, every nerve screaming for me to run. But I didn't. I stayed. Kareem entered, tall and commanding, his presence silencing the chatter. His voice was calm, but every syllable struck like steel. You've accused me of being unfit. You've mocked my grief, ridiculed my choices, and tried to tear apart everything I've built. But before you strip me of my name, perhaps you should look closer at your own. He lifted a folder thick with documents and tossed it onto the table. Pages spilled out, damning evidence glowing under the chandelier. Embezzlement, bribes, illegal transfers, all signed by you. His eyes swept across their stunned faces. Tell me, gentlemen, who is truly unfit to lead. The room erupted. Shouts, denials, threats. But the evidence spoke louder than words. The men who had plotted to destroy him now scrambled like rats caught in daylight. I watched, my chest swelling with a mix of pride and terror. Kareem was magnificent, fierce, unyielding, no longer shackled by grief but wielding it like a weapon. Yet in their eyes I also saw something dangerous. Hatred, rage. They wouldn't forgive him for this. One of them, a man with cold eyes and a voice like venom, turned his gaze toward me. This is her doing, he spat. That woman poisoned you against us. All heads swiveled, their glares searing into my skin. I froze, my body trembling under the weight of their fury. For a heartbeat, shame threatened to crush me. But then Kareem's voice cut through the storm. Say her name again, he growled, stepping between me and them, his stance protective, his eyes blazing. You will not touch her. You will not blame her. She is the reason I found the strength to fight you. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I felt it, the shift. I was no longer just a pawn, no longer the maid they dismissed. In Kareem's eyes, I was something more. But victory is never simple. The board members stormed out, their reputations in ruins, but their hatred intact. Kareem had won the battle, but I knew the war was far from over. That night, as the desert wind howled outside the mansion, Kareem stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. They won't stop, Layla, he murmured. They'll try again. And next time they won't come for me, they'll come for you. Fear knifed through me. Yet when I looked at him, I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was ready. Because this wasn't just his fight anymore, it was ours. And I swore with every fiber of my being that I would not let them take from him again. Not his empire, not his dignity, and not me. The night after the board meeting felt heavier than any I had known. The corridors of the mansion seemed to stretch endlessly, every shadow carrying whispers of danger. Kareem remained in his study, pacing like a lion trapped in his cage, his mind undoubtedly racing with strategies, counterattacks, and the bitter taste of betrayal. I lingered in the doorway, torn between giving him space and stepping into his storm. When he finally looked up, his face was pale with exhaustion, but hardened with determination. They will regroup, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Men like them don't accept defeat. They will strike again, and this time, they will aim where it hurts most. I knew he was right. The memory of their glares still burned in my chest. They hadn't just seen me as an outsider, they had seen me as his weakness, the crack in his armor. Kareem, I whispered, forcing the tremor out of my voice. Then let me be more than that. Don't shield me from this. I won't survive in silence while you bleed. His gaze softened, this ice in his eyes melting for a fleeting moment. Layla, I don't know if I can bear losing someone again. His words shook raw and unguarded. If they take you, if they harm you, it will kill me. I stepped closer, close enough to see the pain etched in the lines of his face. And if they destroy you while I stand aside, it will kill me too. Don't you see we're already in this together? He exhaled sharply as though surrendering to a truth he had fought too long. Slowly he reached for my hand, his grip warm, strong, and trembling all at once. Then together we stand, he murmured. For the first time since stepping into his world, I felt not like his captive but his equal. The following days blurred into a tense rhythm of secrecy and vigilance. Kareem's allies, few but loyal, came to the mansion meeting in hushed tones and guarded glances. Amira moved through the halls like a shadow, her loyalty to Kareem as fierce as her quiet warnings to me. But the threat soon arrived. It was past midnight when the first stone crashed through the mansion's window, shattering glass across the marble floors. Then another and another until the silence of the desert night was ripped apart by chaos. Security scrambled, lights blazed, and in the courtyard shadows moved with malicious intent. I rushed from my room, my heart pounding. Kareem appeared almost instantly, his presence, a shield, his arm pulling me against him. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice steady, though his eyes burned with fury. The intruders never breached the inner sanctum, his guards ensured that, but the message was clear. The board's allies weren't merely threatening reputations anymore, they were threatening lives. After the chaos subsided, the mansion felt different. The air was thick with fear, the staff restless whispers swirling like smoke. Kareem retreated to his study again, but this time he called for me. When I entered, he was holding a small box. He opened it to reveal a necklace, simple, delicate, but with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon encrusted with tiny diamonds. "My mother gave this to me," he said softly. "She told me it was a symbol of protection. I want you to wear it." My throat tightened as he clasped it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin with a tenderness that belied the storms raging around us. "Why me?" I whispered. His eyes met mine, fierce and unflinching. "Because somewhere along the way, Layla, you became the reason I still fight." The confession hit me like a blow and a bomb all at once. My chest burned with emotions I didn't know how to name. I had hated him, feared him, pitied him, and now against all odds I felt bound to him. But even as my heart swelled, the weight of reality pressed harder. If I was truly the reason he fought, then I was also the target they would aim for. And deep inside, I knew the war was only beginning. The morning after the attack, the mansion bore scars of the night's violence, shards of glass glittering across the marble like cruel jewels, guards standing twice as tense at every doorway, the silence of fear clinging to the walls. I walked through the halls with the necklace heavy on my chest, my fingers brushing against its cold surface as though it could anchor me against the rising tide of danger. Kareem hadn't slept. I found him in the courtyard at dawn, standing rigid as the first rays of sun lit the desert sands. His white shirt was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion, yet his posture was unbreakable. He didn't turn when I approached, but I heard the gravel in his voice. "They will not stop until I'm ruined or dead." I swallowed hard, my voice small against the vast emptiness around us. "Then let's stop waiting for them to strike. We take the fight to them." His head snapped toward me, his eyes sharp with surprise. "You would put yourself deeper into this war." "I'm already in it," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "They've made me a weapon against you. If we don't turn the tables, they'll keep using me until there's nothing left of either of us." A long silence stretched between us, the desert wind whipping at our clothes. Finally he nodded, something dangerous and resolute flashing in his gaze. "Then we strike together." The plan came slowly, pieced together over long nights of whispered strategy and documents spread like battle maps across the study. Kareem had always fought with power and wealth, but now he fought with desperation sharpened into steel. And me, I fought with memory, with every night I had watched my son go hungry, with every humiliation I had swallowed, with every wound poverty had carved into my bones. I had nothing left to lose but the truth. Our chance came when one of Kareem's loyal allies, an old friend named Rashid, brought us a lead. Hidden offshore accounts tied directly to the board members' corruption, proof that not only had they stolen from Kareem but from governments and charities across the region. "This is enough to bury them," Rashid said, his voice low but certain. But Kareem's jaw tightened. "They'll know it came from me." "Not if it comes from me," I said suddenly. Both men turned startled by my words, but I pressed on. "They already see me as your weakness. Let me be your weapon instead. I'll deliver this. I'll expose them." Kareem's face hardened instantly. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than staying here waiting for them to shatter every window and every bone until there's nothing left of us." My voice cracked with emotion. "Let me do this, Kareem. If not for you, then for Aman, for Zaid, for every life they've crushed with their greed." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Kareem stepped closer, his hands gripping my shoulders. His eyes, dark and fierce, searched mine as though he were trying to memorize me. "If anything happens to you," I cut him off, my voice a whisper. Then at least I chose to fight. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just pulled me into his arms, his breath warm against my hair, his heart pounding against my chest. "Then may God guard you as fiercely as I cannot," he whispered. The next evening, dressed not in gowns but in plain clothes, I walked into the heart of the city carrying the evidence. My palms sweated, my pulse thundered, but I kept moving. Every step felt like stepping off a cliff, yet the memory of Aman's smile carried me forward. At the newsroom of one of the largest independent papers, I handed over the documents. The editor's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. "Do you understand what this means?" "Yes," I whispered, my throat dry. "It means the truth will finally breathe." When I walked back into the night, the desert wind seemed different. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like fire. But fire, I would soon learn, attracts enemies who are willing to burn everything just to snuff it out. The morning after I'd delivered the evidence, the world erupted. News outlets splashed the headlines across every screen and newspaper: board members of Al-Fed Empire linked to international corruption scandal. Their faces, once symbols of power, now stared back as criminals exposed to the light. The story spread faster than wildfire, each detail shredding the reputation they had built on greed and lies. Inside the mansion, Kareem stood at the balcony, his phone buzzing endlessly with calls he refused to take. His shoulders, once bowed under grief and pressure, seemed straighter, steadier. Yet his eyes carried a storm I recognized too well, the storm of a man who knows victory always demands a price. "They'll come harder now," he muttered, his voice low, as though speaking more to himself than to me. "Cornered wolves are the most dangerous." I stepped closer, my hand brushing his arm. "Then let them come. The world knows who they are now. You're not the one in the shadows anymore, they are." For the first time, his lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. "You've done more for me than I ever imagined anyone could." His gaze softened, lingering on me, as though I was no longer just part of his battle, but part of his survival. But our fragile moment shattered with a single phone call. Rashid burst into the room, his face pale. "They've filed charges against you, Kareem. Fraud, manipulation. They're claiming you fabricated the evidence to cover your own crimes." My blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. The documents." "They've twisted it," Rashid said grimly, "and they've convinced the authorities to investigate. Kareem, they want you arrested." The room tilted. My chest tightened as I saw the fury in Kareem's eyes, fury laced with something darker: fear. Not for himself, but for everything he still stood to lose. That evening, the mansion became a fortress. Lawyers came and went, voices raised in heated arguments. Kareem barely spoke, his mind consumed by strategy, but every so often his eyes would drift to me, silent questions burning there. Did I regret what I had done? Did I still believe in him? The answer was yes, fiercer than ever. But the world outside did not share my conviction. Headlines twisted like knives: "Billionaire's made mistress at the center of scandal." Photographs of me leaving the newsroom plastered across tabloids, captions dripping with venom. They painted me as a temptress, a fraud, a desperate woman manipulating a grieving man for fortune. I wanted to scream to claw at the lies choking me, but Kareem's hand found mine in the dark of the night. Let them say what they want, he whispered, his voice rough. I know who you are. That's all that matters. Still, the battle raged. The board members, though weakened, poured their wealth into lawyers and smear campaigns. The world watched hungrily, ready to devour whichever side stumbled first. And then one evening, as the desert sun bled into twilight, Kareem led me into the locked wing of the mansion, the place I had always been forbidden to enter. My breath caught as he unlocked the heavy door. Inside was a room preserved in time toys scattered across the floor, a half-finished puzzle on a small table, curtains drawn but untouched. It was Zaid's room. I haven't been able to step inside since he died, Kareem confessed, his voice breaking. But tonight I needed you to see it, to understand why I fight, why I sometimes lose myself. This is the heart of my empire, not the company, not the wealth, him, and now. His gaze lifted, meeting mine with raw intensity. You. Tears blurred my vision as I stepped closer, touching the tiny puzzle pieces with trembling fingers. The weight of his grief pressed into me, merging with my own for Aman. In that room, surrounded by memories of loss, something unspoken bloomed between us, a vow not of contracts or wealth, but of survival, of love, forged in the fire of suffering. But vows alone couldn't silence enemies. As the night deepened, Rashid entered, his face grave. They've called for a formal hearing, tomorrow. They want you both there. If you lose Kareem, everything is gone, the company, your name, even your freedom. Silence fell. My heart hammered as Kareem turned to me, his expression unreadable. Then tomorrow, he said quietly, we give them the truth they've tried so hard to bury. The day of the hearing arrived, draped in tension so heavy it clung to my skin like sweat. The city buzzed with anticipation. News crews clustered outside the courthouse, their cameras poised like vultures waiting to feast. Inside the car, Kareem sat beside me, his posture rigid, his face carved from stone. But I felt the tremor in his hand as it brushed mine, the silent confession of a man who had everything to lose and perhaps everything to gain. Stay close to me, he murmured. His voice was low, steady, but beneath it was fear. Not fear of the board, nor the accusations, but fear of losing the fragile bond we had built. I will, I whispered back. My fingers tightened around the crescent moon pendant resting against my chest, the weight of his mother's blessing grounding me. The grand hall of the courthouse was suffocating, marble columns, polished wood, and rows of eyes that felt more like weapons than witnesses. The board members sat opposite us, smug and venomous, their lawyers whispering strategies like serpents coiled to strike. The air reeked of power and corruption, of men who had played this game for too long. When Kareem rose to speak, the silence was absolute. His tall frame commanded the room, his voice calm but resonant, carrying not just authority but conviction. They say I fabricated evidence, he began, his gaze sweeping the crowd. But the truth does not fear the light. I did not create lies, I uncovered them. Lies built by the very men who now point their fingers at me. He laid the documents on the table, each page, a blade sharpened by betrayal. The judge's eyes scanned the evidence while murmurs rippled through the room. The board's lawyers countered, painting him as a grieving man, manipulated by a poor woman desperate for wealth. That was when they turned to me. She is the root of this, one lawyer sneered, pointing directly at me. A maid plucked from poverty who saw her chance to climb into a billionaire's bed. She planted these ideas, she pushed him into this reckless crusade. Without her, he would still be a respected man. Their words stung, but worse than that, they stripped me bare before the world. My throat tightened, shame clawing at me. I wanted to shrink, to disappear, but then Kareem's hand found mine under the table, firm, grounding. He leaned close, whispering so only I could hear. Don't let them take your voice. Speak. Show them who you are. The judge turned to me. Miss Layla, do you wish to respond? I stood, my knees trembling, but my heart steady. I looked at the sea of faces, judges, lawyers, reporters, enemies, and thought of Aman, of the nights I held him while he cried from hunger, of the promise I made to myself, never to bow to cruelty again. I am not here because I sought fortune. I said, my voice clear despite the tremor in my hands. I am here because I was forced to choose between my child's survival and my own dignity. Kareem did not manipulate me. I signed his contract with tears in my eyes and shame in my chest. But in the weeks that followed, I saw a man broken by grief, not greed. A man haunted by a son he could never bring back. And when I found the evidence, I didn't do it for money. I did it because corruption kills. It killed my father. It nearly killed Kareem. It will keep killing unless someone speaks. Silence fell over the hall. My words hung in the air like fragile glass waiting to shatter. Then slowly murmurs began, not mocking this time, but thoughtful, heavy. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp. And you are prepared to stand by this testimony knowing the consequences? Yes, I whispered, my chest heaving, for the truth I am. Beside me, Kareem's eyes shone not with grief this time, but with pride. The board's faces twisted with fury. They threw their final accusations, but the tide had shifted. The evidence was too damning, their defenses too brittle, their arrogance too exposed. By the end of the day, the judge's ruling was clear. The charges against Kareem were dropped, and a full investigation into the board's crimes would begin immediately. The hall erupted in chaos, reporters shouting, flashes exploding like fireworks. But I heard only one sound. Kareem's voice, low and rough as he leaned toward me. You saved me, he whispered. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. No, we saved each other. But even in that fragile moment of victory, I felt it, the weight of enemies still lurking in the shadows, the danger not yet gone. Because men like them don't surrender. They plot, they wait, and they strike when you least expect it. That night, as Kareem and I returned to the mansion, the desert wind howled louder than ever, and deep inside I knew this was not the end of our story. It was only the beginning. That night the mansion glowed with lights, but inside the air was heavy, restless. Victory should have brought peace, yet instead, it carried unease, the kind that comes when you know the enemy is wounded, but not defeated. I walked through the silent halls, my steps echoing too loudly against the marble, the crescent moon pendant warm against my skin, as though reminding me of Kareem's whispered vow, together we stand. I found him on the balcony staring into the vast desert. The moonlight painted his features in silver, his expression unreadable, torn between triumph and fear. For a moment he didn't speak. Then without turning he murmured, Do you realize what you've done today? My throat tightened. I told the truth. His head turned, then his eyes fierce, almost burning. You gave me back my life, my empire, my name, everything they tried to take. But more than that, you gave me back myself. His voice broke, the words trembling with weight. Tears stung my eyes, not from sorrow this time, but from the enormity of what we had carried and survived. I stepped closer, and before I could second-guess, his arms pulled me in. For the first time, the embrace wasn't born of fear or desperation. It was born of something fragile and unspoken. But the world outside didn't pause to honor our moment. By dawn, headlines screamed again. While Kareem had cleared his name, whispers of retaliation surfaced. Anonymous threats arrived at the gate's phone calls in the dead of night. Rashid urged caution, warning that the board's allies still held power. And then came the letter. Amira brought it to me, her hands shaking as she passed the plain envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in cruel precision. You should have stayed silent, for your sake, for your son's. My breath caught, my vision blurred. My son, Aman. The name screamed in my chest like a wound ripped open. My hands trembled as I shoved the letter at Kareem, my voice breaking. They know about him. Kareem, they know. His face hardened instantly, fury flashing in his eyes. He pulled me into his arms as if to shield me from invisible knives. They will not touch him, he swore. On my life they will not lay a hand on your son. But fear clawed at me, cold and relentless. My son was innocent, far from this war, yet somehow dragged into it by the choices I had made. Guilt flooded me like poison. Had I damned him by stepping onto that auction stage, by signing Kareem's contract, by daring to fight back instead of running? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the desert wind batter the windows. My mind replayed every memory of Aman. His laughter, his tiny hands reaching for mine, the way his voice called Mama in the dark. And beneath it all, a whisper I couldn't silence. What if they take him too? Near dawn, I found Kareem in his study again, pacing like a caged predator. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight. "They've crossed a line," he growled. "Threatening you was one thing, but threatening a child, your child." His voice cracked with rage. "I won't forgive it. Ever." I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "Then what do we do? How do we keep him safe?" His eyes lifted, dark and determined. "We bring him here." The words stunned me. "Here to this place, Kareem, it's not safe. It's the center of their hatred." His gaze softened just slightly. "It's safer than leaving him alone in the world they now watch. Here I can protect him. I can protect you." My heart twisted. Bringing Aman into this mansion, into this storm, it terrified me. But the thought of leaving him vulnerable, undefended, was worse. Slowly, painfully, I nodded. "Then we bring him here," I whispered. Kareem exhaled, his shoulders sagging as though the decision had lifted a burden. But I knew the truth. This wasn't the end of the battle, it was the escalation. Because once Aman stepped into Kareem's world, there would be no turning back. 2 days later, the car pulled into the narrow street where my son had been staying with our elderly neighbor. My heart raced as I stepped out, the familiar scent of dust and jasmine wrapping around me. There he was, Aman, small and fragile, clutching his worn backpack, his eyes wide with both relief and confusion when he saw me. "Mama," he cried, running into my arms. I scooped him up, burying my face in his hair, breathing in the scent of home that no mansion could ever replace. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "I'm here, my love. I'll never leave you again." Behind us, Kareem stood by the car, watching silently. His presence was commanding, but in his eyes I saw something gentler, hesitation, almost reverence, as though he knew he was witnessing a bond he could never fully step into. Aman peeked at him from the safety of my arms, his small voice uncertain. "Mama, who is he?" I kissed Aman's forehead, whispering, "He's someone who will keep us safe." The drive back to the mansion was quiet. Aman clutching my hand tightly, his eyes darting nervously at the opulence around him. When we arrived, he pressed close to me, overwhelmed by the vast marble halls and glittering chandeliers. Kareem knelt to his level, something no one in his empire had likely ever seen him do. "Aman," he said softly. His deep voice gentled, "This house is yours now too. You don't have to be afraid." My son studied him with wide, wary eyes, then whispered, "Do you have toys?" For the first time in months, I saw Kareem smile, not the cold, calculated smile he wore for the world, but a real one. "Yes, too many. I think they're waiting for you." He led us into the locked wing, into Zaid's preserved room. My breath caught, fearing it would be too much, too painful. But Kareem surprised me. He pulled aside the dusty curtains, letting sunlight flood the room, and gently placed one of Zaid's old toy cars into Aman's hand. Something inside me cracked at the sight. Kareem, the man who had carried grief like chains, was now offering pieces of his lost son's world to mine. Aman giggled softly, the sound breaking through the heavy air like a fragile melody. But peace was short-lived. That night, as I tucked Aman into the silken bed, a guard slipped into the room, whispering urgently to Kareem. I caught fragments, intruders, messages, retaliation. Kareem's jaw tightened, his voice low but sharp. "Double the security. No one gets past the gates." Fear clawed at me. I pulled Aman close, my voice trembling. "We shouldn't have brought him here. They'll use him against us." Kareem turned to me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and conviction. "No, they will not. Not while I breathe." His words were a vow, but I saw the torment behind them. He wasn't just protecting Aman, he was trying to atone. Every step he took toward my son was also a step toward the memory of Zaid, toward the child he couldn't save. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, Aman's small breaths steady beside me, while Kareem stood guard in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the glow of the hallway lights. He didn't move, didn't falter. He watched over us like a sentinel forged from grief and resolve. And as I drifted into restless dreams, a realization settled heavy in my chest. We were no longer just fighting for Kareem's empire. We were fighting for a family neither of us had planned, bound not by contracts or wealth, but by wounds, by survival, by something deeper than I dared name. But enemies don't rest. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my bones that the next strike would not aim at the Empire, it would aim at our hearts. The strike came sooner than I feared. It was a week after Aman arrived, and for a fleeting moment the mansion almost felt like a home. Kareem had softened in ways I never imagined, sharing quiet breakfasts with us, listening to Aman chatter about school, even showing him how to fly a kite in the vast desert garden. For the first time, I saw glimpses of the man he could have been if grief hadn't devoured him. And for the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to belong here, not as a prisoner of a contract, but as a mother, a woman, a partner. But peace is fragile, and ours shattered in a single night. It began with the power flickering. The lights in the mansion dimmed, then snapped back uneasy. Guards rushed through the halls, their radios hissing with static. I clutched Aman to my chest, dread crawling over my skin. Then came the sound, a crash at the gate, gunfire splitting the silence. Kareem stormed into the room, his face carved with steel. "Stay here," he barked, his hand already on his weapon. "No," I cried, grabbing his arm. "Don't leave us." He looked at me then, and for the briefest second, his mask cracked, showing the fear he carried. Not fear for himself, but for us. "I will not let them through," he whispered fiercely. Then softer, "Trust me." The guards fought bravely, their shouts echoing against the marble halls. I huddled in the corner with Aman, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would give us away. Through the chaos, I heard Kareem's voice, deep and commanding, steady even as bullets rang. He was not just fighting for his empire, he was fighting for us. Minutes felt like hours. Then silence. A terrifying silence that screamed louder than the gunfire had. The door creaked open and Kareem stumbled in, his shirt torn, blood streaking his arm. My breath caught. "Kareem, I'm fine," he rasped, though his face was pale. "They're gone, driven back." But I saw the truth in his eyes. This was no victory. This was a warning. They hadn't come to kill, they had come to test, to remind us they could breach even the fortress of his mansion. Later, after the guards secured the grounds, Kareem sat heavily in a chair, exhaustion dragging him down. I knelt before him, pressing cloth to his wound, my tears falling unchecked. "This will never end, will it?" I whispered. He lifted his gaze to mine, his hand trembling as it reached for my cheek. "Not until I end it," he said, his voice hoarse but certain. I shook my head, fear clawing at me. "And what if ending it takes you from us? What if Aman loses the man he's just begun to trust and I lose?" I stopped, the words too dangerous to finish. His eyes softened, his thumb brushing my skin. "You won't lose me. Not now, not ever." But the truth lingered between us, unspoken but heavy. Every step closer to ending this war meant a step closer to the abyss. That night, long after Aman had fallen asleep in my arms, I sat awake, staring at the dark ceiling. The letter's threat replayed in my mind: "For your sake, for your sons." I realized then that this fight had outgrown Kareem's empire. It was no longer just about wealth or reputation. It was about survival. And survival meant sacrifice. I didn't know yet what that sacrifice would be. My safety, my freedom, perhaps even my love. But I knew the board would not stop until they had broken us completely. And if they couldn't break Kareem with lies or bullets, they would come for me. The next morning dawned too bright, too quiet, as if the desert itself was holding its breath after the chaos of the night before. Aman slept curled against me, his small body clinging as though he understood more than I wanted him to. I brushed his hair back my chest, aching with a mixture of fierce love and gnawing dread. When I slipped from the room, Kareem was already awake, dressed impeccably despite the bandage on his arm. He stood at the head of the long dining table, papers spread out before him like battle plans. His eyes were dark-rimmed with exhaustion but blazing with determination. "They think they can scare us into silence," he said without looking up. "But all they've done is show their desperation." I stepped closer, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. "Kareem, they nearly broke through last night. What if they had reached Aman?" At the mention of my son, his jaw clenched, his gaze snapping to mine. "They won't," he said firmly, almost fiercely. "Not while I live." His certainty should have comforted me, but instead it frightened me. Because what if his vow meant he would throw himself so completely into this war that one day he would not return? Before I could answer, Rashid entered, his face grim. He laid down a folder. We've traced the attack. It wasn't just rogue mercenaries. It was sanctioned, funded by the last of the board's allies. And they won't stop until one of you falls. The words chilled me. One of us. Either Karim or me, or worse, Aman. We strike first, Karim said, his voice like steel. Expose every last one of them until there is nowhere left to hide. But I shook my head, my voice trembling. And how many more attacks before then? How many more nights will Aman sleep with gunfire echoing outside his window? The silence was heavy. Karim looked at me, and for once his unshakable resolve wavered. What are you saying, Layla? I swallowed hard. My chest burned with the words, but I forced them out. Maybe Aman and I shouldn't stay here. Maybe the safest thing is for us to disappear until this is over. His eyes widened, his face tightening with something raw fear, pain, maybe both. No, don't say that. Tears blurred my vision. Karim, this isn't just about us anymore. If they want to destroy you, they'll use him. I won't let Aman become another Zaid. The name hit him like a blow. His hands slammed against the table, papers scattering. Don't you dare compare them! His voice cracked, the fury stripped bare. I wasn't there for Zaid, and it destroyed me. But I am here now. I will not lose you. I will not lose him. My heart broke at the torment in his voice, but still the truth weighed heavy. And what if staying here means you lose both of us anyway? The silence stretched unbearable. Finally, his shoulders sagged, and he looked at me with eyes no longer blazing but pleading. If you go, I may win the war, but I will lose the reason I'm fighting. The tears I had held back spilled over. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. What bound us together wasn't just survival or even the fragile love growing between us. It was grief for children lost, for families broken, for lives shattered by greed and power. And grief, I knew, was both the fiercest weapon and the cruelest chain. That night, as Aman slept peacefully for the first time in days, I lay awake beside him, staring into the darkness. Karim's words echoed in my mind. If you go, I lose the reason I'm fighting. I wanted to protect my son more than anything, but I also knew leaving would break Karim, shatter the man he had clawed his way back to becoming. And so I faced the impossible question to save one. Must I risk losing the other? The choice gnawed at me for days. Every time I looked at Aman, I saw innocence I would kill to protect. Every time I looked at Karim, I saw a man clawing his way out of grief because of me and terrified of being abandoned again. My heart felt like a battlefield torn between the two halves of my soul. The attack slowed, but the silence felt dangerous, like the pause before a storm. Karim's allies whispered of new schemes of enemies regrouping. Rashid warned us to prepare for the worst. I lived each moment with dread coiled in my chest, waiting for the blow I knew would come. And then it did. It was a quiet afternoon when Aman's laughter filled the garden. He was flying the kite Karim had given him, his small body running across the grass, the string trailing in his hands. For a moment, joy pierced through the tension, pure, untainted joy. Karim stood nearby, watching with a softness I had never seen in him before. His eyes followed Aman with a tenderness that almost broke me. But then a sound cracked through the air, a single gunshot. The kite snapped free, fluttering into the sky. Aman froze, his eyes wide. In an instant, Karim lunged, pulling him into his arms, shielding him with his body as guards swarmed the grounds. Shouts rang, footsteps thundered, and I stood rooted in horror, my scream caught in my throat. It was over as quickly as it began. The shooter never breached the walls taken down by Karim's men before he could fire again. But the message was clear. They hadn't come for Karim this time. They had come for my son. I rushed forward, grabbing Aman from Karim's arms, clutching him so tightly he whimpered. My tears fell hot against his hair as I whispered, "It's okay, my love. You're safe. You're safe." But inside I was shattered, because I knew he wasn't safe. Not here. Not anywhere near Karim's war. That night, after Aman finally fell asleep in my arms, I found Karim in the study. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he poured himself a drink. He didn't look at me when he spoke. It should have been me. It should always be me. I stepped closer, my voice breaking. Karim, they won't stop. Not until one of us is gone. And I can't. I won't risk Aman's life anymore. His eyes lifted, blazing with desperation. Layla, don't say it. Tears blurred my vision. We have to leave, for his sake. He's just a child. He deserves a life without bodyguards and gunfire. The glass in his hand shattered against the floor shards, scattering like broken promises. He stepped toward me, his voice raw, pleading. If you go, they win. They take everything, my empire, my name, and now you. Do you understand? You are all I have left. My chest ached with love and anguish. I reached for his face, my palms against his rough cheeks. And if I stay, I may lose the only thing I have left, my son. The silence between us was unbearable, broken only by the pounding of our hearts. His hands covered mine, holding them against his skin, as if he could will me to stay. His voice was barely a whisper. Don't make me live through losing again. My tears fell freely. And don't make me choose between you and him. We stood there, two broken souls bound by grief, love, and impossible choices. And deep down, I knew the truth. No matter what decision I made, something precious would shatter. The storm had come, and it demanded a sacrifice. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the desert wind howling against the windows. It felt like a warning, as if the earth itself knew what I was about to do. Aman still slept peacefully, his tiny hand curled against my arm, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that steadied my breath. For a long time, I just stared at him, memorizing the curve of his face, the softness of his hair, the innocence untouched by the cruelty that surrounded us. When I finally rose, my heart was heavy with a decision I had fought against for days. Kareem was still in his study, his head bowed over stacks of papers, but I could tell he hadn't slept. His suit was immaculate as always, but his eyes were hollow, haunted. He looked up when I entered, his gaze instantly locking on mine. Layla, he said quietly, almost fearfully, as if he already knew. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We can't stay. Not with Aman here. They won't stop until they break you, and if they can't, they'll take him. I can't let that happen. His face hardened, his jaw clenching as his hands tightened into fists. I told you I'll protect him. I'll protect you. Tears burned my eyes. And what if you can't? What if one bullet slips past your guards? What if one night we don't wake up? My voice broke. I can't bury my son Kareem. I can't live through what you did. The silence cut between us like a blade. For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly he rose from his chair. His movements were stiff, as though every step cost him something. When he reached me, his eyes were raw, stripped of the armor he wore for the world. You're not wrong, he whispered, his voice trembling. Every night I see Zaid in my dreams. I hear the splash, the silence that followed the weight of my failure. And when I see Aman, when I see you, I swear I will not make that mistake again. But if leaving is what you believe will keep him safe, his voice faltered, cracking under the weight, then I will not stop you. I broke then. My tears spilled as I pressed my forehead against his chest, his arms wrapping around me like he was afraid I would disappear. His heart pounded beneath my cheek, each beat a reminder of what we had built, something fragile, unexpected, and real. I don't want to leave you, I whispered, but I have to protect him. His breath was ragged as he pressed his lips against my hair. Then promise me, it isn't goodbye. Promise me you'll come back when it's safe. I lifted my face, my tears mingling with the raw desperation in his gaze. I promise. The following day, Rashid arranged safe passage. Aman and I would be taken far from the city, hidden until Kareem finished his war. Every moment felt like a countdown, each step through the mansion burning itself into my memory. The marble floors, the garden where Aman laughed, the balcony where Kareem and I first spoke as equals. When it was time to go, Kareem stood at the gates, his hand clutching mine so tightly it hurt. His other hand rested gently on Aman's shoulder, his eyes softening at the boy's innocence. Be brave for your mother, he said quietly. Aman nodded, his small voice steady. Will you come visit us? Kareem's lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. One day I will. As the car pulled away, I looked back through the glass, watching Kareem's figure shrink against the backdrop of the desert. He stood tall, unyielding, but I could see the truth in his posture, the weight of letting go, the torment of choosing survival over love. I pressed Aman close, whispering into his hair, We'll be safe now. But even as I said it, my heart ached with the promise I had made. Because one day when the war was over, when the board was defeated and the shadows silenced, I knew I would return. Not just for Kareem's sake, but for mine. The days away from the mansion blurred into a haze of fear and longing. Rashid's men had hidden us in a modest villa far from the city, tucked between dusty hills and forgotten roads. It was nothing like Kareem's marble fortress here. The walls were plain, the windows barred the rooms sparsely furnished, but it was safe. Or so I told myself every night, as I lay awake listening to Aman's quiet breathing beside me. He adjusted faster than I did. Children have a way of bending with the wind, of finding light even in shadows. He played with the toy car Kareem had given him, racing it across the cracked tiles, his laughter filling the silence. I smiled for him, but inside I was unraveling. Every sound outside made me jump. Every knock at the door set my pulse racing. I checked the locks a dozen times before bed, whispering silent prayers that tonight would not be the night they found us. But what broke me most wasn't fear. It was the emptiness. I missed him. Kareem, the man who had bought me like a possession, who had chained me with a contract, who had forced me into a life I hadn't chosen yet, had become the man I couldn't stop thinking of. His voice, his fierce eyes, his trembling confessions in the dark. I replayed them over and over, my chest aching with a longing I didn't want to admit was love. Weeks passed with no word. Rashid visited once, his face grave. Kareem is still fighting, he told me. The evidence you delivered has weakened them, but the board's allies are relentless. They want to bleed him dry. Is he safe? I whispered, afraid of the answer. Rashid's silence spoke louder than words. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window staring at the moon, clutching the crescent pendant at my throat. Don't let him fall, I begged silently. Not after everything. Not when I promised I would return. And then one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the world shifted. Rashid burst into the villa, his face pale, his voice urgent. They've taken him. My breath caught. What, who? The board's men. They ambushed his convoy on the way back from a meeting. Kareem is gone. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table, my legs trembling. No, that's not possible. Rashid's eyes burned with desperation. They want leverage. They couldn't destroy him through the courts, so now they'll try through fear. And if we don't act, Layla, they will kill him. Aman clutched my hand, his small eyes wide with terror. Mama. I pulled him close, forcing my voice to steady. It's okay, my love. But inside I was drowning. Kareem, the man who had vowed to protect us, who had carried his grief like a weapon, who had become my anchor, was in their hands now. And I knew then that I couldn't hide anymore. It wasn't enough to run. It wasn't enough to survive. If I wanted him back, if I wanted our future, I would have to fight. With trembling hands, I lifted my son's face, kissing his forehead. Stay with Rashid, I whispered. Be brave for me, Aman. Then I stood, my heart pounding with a fierce clarity I hadn't felt before. They had stolen my father once. They had stolen Kareem's son. They thought they could keep taking. But not this time. This time I would be the storm. The night I chose to fight, I felt something awaken inside me, a fire that had been buried under years of fear, shame, and survival. I was no longer the poor girl sold at an auction, no longer the pawn shuffled between men's hands. I was a mother. I was a woman who had learned what love meant, and I was ready to burn the world to protect it. Rashid tried to stop me. Layla, it's too dangerous. They'll kill you before you get close. But I shook my head, my voice low, steady, unyielding. If they kill him, they kill me anyway. And if I do nothing, I'll never forgive myself. Tell me where they've taken him. For a long moment he studied me, seeing the determination in my eyes. Finally he nodded. They're holding him at an old desert compound. It used to belong to Kareem's father before the board stripped it away. They chose that place for a reason. They want him to feel the weight of his past before they end him. The irony cut deep. To be destroyed in the shadow of his father's legacy? Kareem didn't deserve that. I spent the next hours in restless preparation. Rashid gave me a disguise, dark clothes, a scarf to hide my face. My hands trembled as I checked the small dagger he pressed into my palm. It wasn't much, but it was something. Before I left, I knelt before Aman. His little hands clutched mine, his eyes wide with fear. Mama, don't go. My heart cracked, but I forced a smile, brushing my fingers through his hair. I'll come back. I swear it. I'll bring him back too. You'll see us both again. Yes. He threw his arms around my neck and I held him like it might be the last time. Then with tears stinging my eyes, I let Rashid lead me into the night. The compound loomed out of the desert like a scar, its crumbling walls bathed in the pale light of the moon. Guards patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung over their shoulders, shadows stretching across the sand. We crept closer, hiding among the dunes until I could see the inner courtyard. My heart nearly stopped. Kareem was there. He was bound to a chair, his face bruised, blood staining the corner of his mouth. But his back was straight, his eyes blazing with defiance even as his captors jeered and circled him like vultures. One of them struck him across the face. "Where's the money, Kareem? Where's the empire you thought could save you?" Kareem spat blood, his voice a growl. "You'll never touch it. You'll never be more than cowards hiding behind threats." Rage and pride surged in my chest. Even broken, he was unbreakable. Rashid grabbed my arm, whispering urgently, "We need a plan. We can't just storm in." But I was already moving. I slipped through the shadows, heart pounding, every step a silent prayer. My dagger glinted in the moonlight as I crept closer until I was behind one of the guards. My breath caught in my throat as I drove the blade into his side, muffling his cry before he crumpled to the sand. The others turned at the sound, confusion sparking. In that instant, Rashid's men opened fire from the dunes, drawing their attention. Chaos erupted, shouts, gunshots, the crack of boots against stone. I ran to Kareem, my hands trembling as I cut the ropes binding him. "It's me," I whispered fiercely. "I'm here." His head lifted, his swollen eyes widening in disbelief. "Layla." His voice was hoarse, broken, but filled with something I had never heard before, hope. I pulled the last knot free, and he sagged against me, his weight heavy but alive. "Can you stand?" He nodded weakly, gripping my arm. "I can, with you." We stumbled toward the shadows, but then a gunshot rang out, the bullet sparking against the stone just inches from us. One of the board's men had broken free, his weapon aimed directly at Kareem's chest. Time slowed. I saw Kareem's eyes widen, his body moving to shield me. And in that frozen moment, I knew what I had to do. I threw myself forward. The bullet tore through the night air with a sound I will never forget. I shoved Kareem to the ground, my body twisting, my heart hammering in my throat. For one terrifying instant, I thought it had found me, but it struck the stone wall behind us, exploding in a spray of dust. The man cursed, raising his weapon again, but I didn't hesitate. My dagger was still in my hand, slick with blood and resolve. I lunged the blade, sinking deep into his chest before he could fire again. His eyes went wide, a strangled cry leaving his throat as he crumpled to the sand. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of gunfire echoing farther off. Rashid's men were winning, the last of the board's guards falling one by one. I dropped the dagger, my hands trembling as I turned back to Kareem. He was staring at me, his face pale, his lips parted, his eyes filled with something raw and unguarded. I reached for him, helping him to his feet, his weight heavy against me. "You..." His voice was hoarse, choked with disbelief. "You saved me." Tears burned my eyes. "I wasn't going to lose you. Not like this. Not to them." His hand gripped mine. His knuckles bruised his skin, rough but warm. "Layla," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought I had nothing left to fight for. I thought love died with Zaid. But you've given me everything again, even when I didn't deserve it." The ground seemed to tilt beneath us as the weight of his words sank in. My chest ached with a mix of grief and relief, love and fear. I wanted to collapse into him, to let him hold me forever, but the battle wasn't over yet. Rashid ran toward us, his gun still smoking. "We need to move now, reinforcements could be on their way." With his help, we half-carried, half-dragged Kareem through the compound and into the waiting vehicles. My heart didn't stop racing until the desert swallowed the ruins behind us, their shadow fading into the night. Back at the safe house, I tended to Kareem's wounds myself. My hands shook as I cleaned the blood from his face, bandaging the gashes along his ribs. He winced, but never once took his eyes off me. Finally, when silence settled between us, he caught my wrist, his grip weak but unyielding. "Layla, you had every reason to run, every reason to let me die. And yet you came back for me." His eyes glistened, his voice ragged. "Why?" I swallowed hard, my tears spilling as I whispered the truth I had been too afraid to face. "Because I love you. Because somewhere along the way, you became my home. and I couldn't let them take you from me. His breath caught his eyes closing, as if the weight of my words lifted something inside him. When they opened again, I saw it. The man he could have been without the chains of grief, without the ghosts of the past. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against mine, his voice trembling. Then I swear to you, Layla, I will end this war. I will tear them down piece by piece. And when it's over, I will spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to love me. I closed my eyes, the warmth of his breath mingling with mine, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe in hope. But even as his vow filled me with light, a shadow lingered in my heart. Because I knew the board would not rest and our battle was not yet finished. And somewhere deep in the night, as I held him close, I couldn't shake the feeling that the greatest test of our love was still to come. Kareem recovered slowly, his body bearing the scars of torture, but his spirit refused to break. Each morning, I watched him force himself to rise to stand straighter than the day before. His bruises faded, the bandages came off, but the fire in his eyes burned hotter than ever. He spent hours with Rashid poring over files, strategies, lists of allies and enemies. His empire had been carved apart but not destroyed. "They think they've broken me," he muttered one night, his jaw tight as he stared at maps littered with pins. "But all they've done is remind me of what I stand to lose, and I won't let them take it." I stood in the doorway, my heart aching. Because while he fought to reclaim his throne, I carried the weight of something heavier, fear. Fear that one day the cost of his war would be him. Fear that Aman would grow up without the man who had become a father in every way that mattered. And then the letter arrived. It came with no name, no seal, just a single sheet slipped under our door. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "You saved him once. You won't again. Leave the country or bury your son." The words blurred through my tears. I clutched the paper so tightly it tore my chest heaving. I ran to Kareem, thrusting it into his hands. His face darkened as he read, his knuckles whitening around the page. "They dare—" His voice was low, trembling with fury. "They dare threaten Aman." I gripped his arm, my voice breaking. "Kareem, this has to stop. They'll never stop coming, and I won't risk our child again." He turned to me, then his eyes blazing with a desperation that mirrored my own. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't woken every night since the shooting, dreaming of him in that grave with Zaid? But if I walk away now, if I run, they'll never stop hunting us. The only way to end this is to finish it." I shook my head, tears spilling. "And what if finishing it means I lose you?" He cupped my face, his rough palms trembling against my skin. "Then at least you'll know I fought to the last breath to keep you safe." I broke, then sobbing against his chest, my fists clutching his shirt. "I don't want your last breath. I want a lifetime, with you, with Aman." He held me, his own body shaking, but his voice remained steady. "And you'll have it. I swear to you, Layla, you'll have it." But even as he said it, even as his vow wrapped around me like a fragile shield, I knew the truth. A war like his could only end in two ways: victory or death. Victory. And in my heart I feared which fate was already reaching for him. The weeks that followed felt like living on the edge of a blade. Kareem rebuilt his empire piece by piece, reclaiming loyal allies, striking against those who had betrayed him. The newspapers called it a resurrection. To me, it felt like watching him set himself on fire, just to light the way. I tried to shield Aman from the tension, from the whispers of violence, but children are not blind. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he asked softly, "Mama, is Baba going to leave us like the others?" The question pierced me deeper than any knife. I kissed his forehead, whispering, "No, my love. He's fighting so he can stay with us. That's all he wants." But as the words left my lips, I prayed they weren't a lie. Then came the night of the final blow. Rashid burst into the villa, his face pale with urgency. "They've called a meeting," he said. "The last of the board. They want a truce, but it's a trap, I can feel it." Kareem's jaw tightened. "Then it ends tonight." I grabbed his arm, panic surging through me. "No, Kareem, please don't go. They'll kill you." He turned to me, his eyes burning with a fire that frightened me. "Layla, if I don't face them, they'll keep coming for you. For Aman. I can't live with that." He held my face in his hands, his forehead pressed to mine. "If I don't return, promise me you'll protect him. Promise me you'll live." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I choked out, "Don't you dare ask me to live without you." He kissed me then, desperate as if it might be the last. And before I could stop him, he was gone into the night. The hours stretched into eternity. I sat by the window, almond curled against me, my heart pounding with every sound outside, until finally I heard it distant gunfire, then silence. The door burst open. Rashid stumbled in his shirt stained with blood that wasn't his. His face was grim, his voice hoarse. "It's done." I rose on shaking legs, my voice breaking. "Where is he?" For a moment Rashid didn't answer. Then slowly he stepped aside. And there he was, Kareem. He was wounded, his arm bloodied, his face pale, but his eyes were alive, alive. I ran to him, collapsing into his arms, my sobs shaking us both. He held me, his voice a whisper against my ear. "It's over. They're gone. All of them." The weight of months of years of fear and grief broke in that moment. We fell to the floor, clinging to each other as if the world might still take us apart. And for the first time I believed we could finally breathe. But as I looked into his eyes, filled with both exhaustion and hope, I realized something else. The war had ended, but the scars it left behind would never fully heal. For him, for me, for us. And yet maybe that was what love truly was, not the absence of scars, but the choice to carry them together. The days after Kareem's victory felt surreal, as if we had stepped into someone else's life. The newspapers hailed him as the man who had crushed corruption, who had risen from betrayal and blood. But behind the headlines, it was just us two people, too exhausted to celebrate, holding each other in the quiet corners of our fractured hearts. For the first time in months, the house was silent. No guards pacing the halls, no whispers of plots, no threats slipped under doors. Aman laughed again, without fear, chasing his kite across the garden, his joy untainted by shadows. Watching him, I realized how much we had lost just to arrive at this fragile peace. One evening, Kareem and I sat together on the balcony, the desert stretching endlessly before us, painted gold by the setting sun. His hand found mine, rough and scarred but steady. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Do you hate me for what I dragged you into?" I turned to him, my chest tightening. "I should. You bought me like a possession. You threw me into a war I never asked for. You nearly cost me my son." My voice trembled as I held his gaze. "But I don't hate you. Because somewhere in all the chaos you gave me something I never thought I'd have again, hope. A reason to fight. A reason to believe I could be more than just broken pieces." His eyes shone with something raw, unguarded. "I don't deserve you." I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "Maybe not. But love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing. And I choose you, Kareem. I choose us." He broke then, the man who had stood unflinching before boardrooms and bullets. His tears fell against my hands as he pulled me into his arms. For the first time since Zaid, since all the ghosts of his past, I felt him breathe freely, as though he finally believed in tomorrow. Weeks turned into months. Kareem rebuilt his empire, but differently this time. No longer an untouchable king, but a man who knew what it meant to bleed, to lose, to rise again. And by his side, I rebuilt myself too, not a servant, not a victim, but a woman who had walked through fire and survived. One night, as Aman slept upstairs, Kareem held me close and whispered, "You saved me, Layla. Not just from them, from myself. I lived in shadows and you dragged me back into the light." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't from pain. They were from something rarer, something harder to find after so much loss. Peace. And that's what I want to leave you with here and now. Life will scar you. It will rip things from you that you thought you couldn't live without. But sometimes the broken pieces are where the light enters. Sometimes the wounds are what teach us to love more fiercely, more honestly. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever lost, if you've ever thought you couldn't survive, let my story remind you can. And maybe, just maybe, love will find you in the ashes the way it found me. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And leave a comment below. I would love to know your thoughts, your own stories, your scars, and how you found strength in them.